Welcome. I forgot to record this program when I did it at the Sunday school at church last Sunday, and I was asked, is this going to be on YouTube? And I had a big exam coming up, and so I really didn't feel that I had time to go through and edit a program for that. But I got to thinking about it, going, well, we did cover some important stuff, and I don't want there to be gaps in this. So I'm actually going to record 1 Corinthians 10 separately, just so we don't have gaps. If you're going through this study and you want a contiguous discussion on 1 Corinthians, it's better to not have chapters that we don't talk about if we can help it. So I'm going to go ahead and just do this one separate, apart from the class, and just record it for the camera so that I can get it on YouTube, okay? So it's not obviously going to be the same as what we talked about in class because there was that social interaction, but hopefully you'll get the important things. This past Sunday, I had to buy something at Lowe's early in the morning, and I was in a hurry because I had to get to teach this class on Sunday, right? And so class started around 11, and I was pushing it really good there, and I was excited because there weren't that many people in the store, so I figured I'd go get my emergency item and get to the cashier and get out of there and get home and be finished with everything before I had to go to church there, right? Well, the lady in front of me changed my plans because she had like over $1,000 worth of stuff, and none of her credit cards would work. And she tried one after another, and none of them would work. Now, I was conflicted. I was going through two emotions. One was, why me? Of all the times to come to the store and get behind somebody, why did I have to get behind this person? So I'm probably going to be late, and so I'm feeling that frustration and a little bit angry. But on the other side, I've kind of been there before, when you get up there and none of your cards will work for whatever reason. It's extremely humiliating. It's one of the most embarrassing things that you can go through. And it's publicly humiliating. And of course, for this lady, there wasn't one cashier. There were two. There was one training person, and then the cashier there, and so there are two cashiers to make you feel really small. So I felt bad for her. I was glad it wasn't me. Okay, but I also felt embarrassed for her. That is bad. When you get to the front of the line, it's your turn, and you don't have what it takes to pass. Yeah, it's humiliating and depressing in some ways. There's something worse than that, though, is to go through your life and to call yourself a Christian and to believe that you're saved, and you get to the end and you stand before God and He says, you don't measure up. You didn't make it. And you go to that other place. I've heard thousands of people's near-death experiences. Rarely, but it does happen. Rarely I come across one like that, where a person has their near-death experience and they make it to the end. And with a near-death experience, it's not permanent because God knows He's sending you back. But what He tells them is that if you were to die today, you would not make it. Okay? Now, in these cases, it has always been due to lack of forgiveness. You were too hard on other people. You did not give them the grace and forgiveness that I gave you. So you're not welcome. If you were to die now, you would go to that other place. Okay, that has happened. And there is some biblical support for that. Now, personally, I do believe in once saved, always saved. You might be surprised to hear that, but I do believe that. I believe that once you're His, once you're in His family, that's a permanent thing, and God will never let you go. However, He knows those who are His. He has seen your whole life from when it began all the way to when it ends. And so His summary of us is based on a complete data set. Ours is not. So I can't tell other people. I can barely tell myself that once saved, always saved, because there is that verse that says, he who endures to the end shall be saved. There are trials in our life. There are desert periods in our life where we go through really, really difficult experiences where it seems like God's not there. It seems like He's not answering our prayers. And what we do in those dark times will help us to discern whether we're really his or not. When we accepted Christ, was it Jesus or Genie that we accepted into our hearts? If it was Genie, then we want control. We want an idol-based relationship. And we're like, okay, God, I'm making some sacrifices. I'm going to church. I'm doing the Bible study. I'm praying, and you owe me. And this is what I expect. And if they don't get what they expect, or worse, if they get the opposite of what they expect, they're done. God, I don't have time for this. If you really love me, this is what I expect you to do. If you were real, this is what I expect. Since you have all this power, you own the cattle on 1,000 hills, well, kill a few for me. Bottom line is that if you don't measure up to my standards, I'm done with you. And so I'm going to go off and have my pleasure in the world and phooey on you. And those experiences, I believe, are there to test us. Okay, and sometimes we have to go through that. Unfortunately, for those individuals, I think some of them might make it because God knows the heart, and this is a very complicated algorithm, and God knows data that I don't know because, how much were they given? How much understanding did they really have? Did they have a fair understanding of what the gospel was? Did they have access to a Bible? There's all kinds of things there, so that God knows that stuff. But I am saying that if we toss him aside and choose not to pursue any relationship with Christ, we're not involved in praying to him, we're not interested in reading the Bible or learning more about what he had to say, that's kind of bad. Okay, so in 1 Corinthians 10, we see scriptural support for the idea that faith on our part is necessary for the whole journey, and if we abandon it halfway through, we could be in some trouble. Okay, so let's jump into the chapter, shall we? We're going to start with a cartoon about the children of Israel and their journey from Egypt to the Promised Land, and it discusses how, although they all started out together, they saw miracles. They saw God call down curses on the Egyptian people. He parted the Red Sea for them. He made manna come out of heaven to feed them in the desert. They saw all those miracles. They saw God appear as a pillar of fire that stayed with them while they're in the desert. And yet, many of them still got angry with them and said, forget this, we want to go back to Egypt. The idols were better than this God is, kind of a deal. And God was really upset, and he punished them. And many of them, most of them that started out, didn't make it to the Promised Land. Only 2 out of the whole group made it. Why? Because of that faith issue. And so Paul uses that example for Christians, for us, to say, look, be careful. Be careful. All right? Don't be so proud that you think you can't fail. Show some humility and maintain your faith on a regular basis.
God led the Israelites to the edge of Canaan, the land he had promised them. It was time for the Israelites to enter the land and conquer it. But first, God instructed Moses to send 12 spies to walk through the land. The Israelites had never been to Canaan. God wanted them to see what it was like. Moses obeyed God and chose one man from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. Go through the wilderness and into the hill country to see what this land is like, Moses said to the spies. See if the people are strong or weak, many or few. See if the cities are big or small, and whether they have thick walls around them. Look at the land. Does it have forests? Does it produce a lot of crops or just a few? Bring some of the crops back with you. We want to see what kinds of plants grow in the land and how big the crops get. The spies were excited to see the land God had promised them. Let's get going. I can't wait to see what God is giving to us. The spies walked from the south all the way to the northern part of the land, watching the people and keeping track of what the land was like. Their trip took 40 days. Look at the size of these grapes, the spies said as they entered a place called Eshcol. Get a pole to put this bunch of grapes on so 2 of us can carry it. The bunch is too big for just one man to carry. You think these grapes are big? Look at the size of those people, the spies must have said in disbelief as they saw the people of the land. They look like giants. The spies continued their journey through the land and returned to Moses to give their report. This land is everything God said it would be. It is full of lush fields for our animals and good land for our crops. Look at the size of these grapes and the quality of these pomegranates and figs. The people must have rejoiced. What a wonderful land God is giving to us. Well, there is some bad news, the spies reported. The people are big and strong, and the cities are walled and very great. There's no way we can take this land. The Israelites apparently responded to the report with a fearful uproar. They didn't want to fight a war against giants, but Caleb, one of the spies, quieted the people. We can defeat these people. Let's go now. What are we waiting for? Don't listen to Caleb, the other spy said. Those people are stronger than we are. Attacking them would be silly. We also saw giants so tall that we looked like grasshoppers next to them. Hearing this report, the people complained against Moses and the Lord. We would have been better off dying in the desert or in Egypt. We never should have left Egypt. Why has God brought us here only to cause us and our children to die by the sword? Let's select a new leader and go back to Egypt. Moses and his brother Aaron fell face down before the people. Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes and pleaded with the people. We saw this land flowing with milk and honey. It's a good land, and God will bring us into it. Don't rebel against God, and don't fear the people of this land, for their protection is gone, and the Lord is with us. The Israelites became so angry at Joshua and Caleb that they wanted to stone them to death. At that point, the Lord's presence appeared in the tabernacle. How long will these people reject me? God said to Moses. I will strike them all dead and make a great nation from you, Moses. Moses said, What would the Egyptians say if they heard you killed your people? Other nations will think you are a weak God and can't bring your people into the land. Instead, forgive the Israelites according to the greatness of your mercy. I have forgiven the people, the Lord responded. But because of their complaints against me, I will not allow them to see the promised land. They will wander for 40 years, 1 year for every day the spies were in the land. Everyone 20 years old and older will die in the wilderness. Only Joshua and Caleb will live to enter the promised land because they trusted me and wanted the people to enter the land. When Moses reported this to the people, they were very sad. The next morning they got up early and went to the top of the mountain. Here we are, Lord, they said. We will take the land that you promised to us. We have sinned against you. Do not enter the land and try to fight the enemies, Moses warned the people. Because you didn't trust him, the Lord is not with you. You will lose the battle and die. The people ignored God's commands again and left their camp to fight the Amalekites and the Canaanites. But the enemy armies defeated the Israelites and drove them back. After their defeat, Israel didn't try to take the promised land. They had no choice but to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, just as God had said they would. The Israelites didn't trust God. They feared the giant enemies instead. Then they disobeyed God by trying to attack when God told them not to. God is always worthy of our trust, even when He asks us to do something hard. God wants you to trust Him with all your heart.
Okay, so let's get into the chapter. Remember our history, friends, and be warned. All our ancestors were led by the providential cloud and taken miraculously through the sea. They went through the waters in a baptism like ours, as Moses led them from enslaving death to salvation life. They all ate and drank identical food and drink, meals provided daily by God. They drank from the rock, God's fountain, for them that stayed with them wherever they were, and the rock was Christ. But just experiencing God's wonder and grace didn't seem to mean much. Most of them were defeated by temptation during the hard times in the desert, and God was not pleased. The same thing could happen to us. We must be on guard so that we never get caught up in wanting our own way as they did. And we must not turn our religion into a circus as they did. First the people partied, then they threw a dance. We must not be sexually promiscuous. They paid for that, remember, with 23,000 deaths in one day. We must never try to get Christ to serve us instead of serving him. They tried it, and God launched an epidemic of poisonous snakes. We must be careful not to stir up discontent. Discontent destroyed them. Now, with regard to this passage, this is in the Message translation by Peterson. And I really love Peterson because of his ability to take the Greek and explain it, including explain the idioms in American idioms so that it's very plain to us. And he does a good job of giving you the meaning. So I'd recommend reading those verses in Peterson several times so that you are able to absorb the meaning. However, keep in mind, the Message is at times a good translation and often a good paraphrase. And here it's a good paraphrase because if you read the language that's actually used, it's very different. I do think Peterson captures the heart of it. He captures the essence, but the actual Bible uses different language rather. So I do recommend that you look at both. Okay, take a look at Peterson, who breaks it down and digests it for you to give you the gist of it, but also read it in the original and read a good translation to get an idea as to what it actually said. So next, let's go to one of my favorite accurate translations, which is Wuest's version. And what does Wuest say in verses 6 through 10? Now these things have been made examples for us to the end that we should not be those who have a passionate craving for evil things, as also those had a passionate craving. Stop becoming idolaters as some of them were, even as it stands written. The people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to be giving way to hilarity. All right, so when he talks about, you notice when you go back to Peterson that he talks about wanting your own way. Well, that is idolatry. If you think of the essence of idolatry, idolatry is a deal. It's very simple, very, very simple. The idea is, okay, this is a piece of wood or a stone that is my idol. You're my God. My job is to bring you sacrifices. I give you appropriate sacrifices. You give me what I want. I give you what you want. You give me what I want. I earn the favor that comes to me by this deal. I expect you to do for me, or I might just switch gods. Okay, that's the deal, and it's basically a relationship that gives me control. So what I really want is not you. I don't want this piece of wood or this rock. I don't want a relationship with this thing. I want what I can get out of it. I want the deal. I want control to make my life work. I want to have some say. I want control. Okay. Now, if we approach the real God with this attitude, I want control, what do I have to do? Okay, my sacrifices are I go to church, I pray, I read my Bible. Now, you owe me. Okay? You owe me. And if life gets difficult, you're not living up to your end of the bargain. I did what I was supposed to do. You didn't measure up to what you were supposed to do. And what Paul is warning about is that attitude towards God. Because the children of Israel, when they were coming out of that desert, I mean, it was hot. No air conditioning, okay? I don't know what the bathroom facilities are like out there in the desert, but they couldn't be great. It's not like you have trees to go behind, right? So that couldn't have been real fun. And the manna came from heaven. He gave them meat from the birds and everything. However, that gets old, and they started complaining about stuff like that. And then they started going back and doing some of the same sins that they were doing back in Egypt, and God wasn't happy, obviously. He punished them for that. And so, they basically, that when it talks about the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to be giving way to hilarity, it talks about, really boisterous stuff. Let me go look at what does hilarity mean. The synonyms are gayness, glee, gleefulness, jocundity, joviality, merriment, mirth, and so forth. Okay? The idea of a silly kind of fun. boisterous merriment, noisy, turbulent, rowdy, marked by expressive of exuberance and high spirits. So there you go. Lots of high spirits. Kind of bordering on, the idea it gives you is almost silly. Okay. This is Weiss, verses 6 through 10. Neither let us be committing fornication, even as certain of them committed fornication, and there fell in one day 23,000. Neither let us be putting the Lord to an all-out test, trying him to the utmost, even as certain of them tried him, and by means of snakes were perishing day after day. Stop grumbling discontentedly, complaining, as certain of them grumbled, and kept on being destroyed, one after another, by the destroyer. So this is referring to some of their behaviors. They started engaging in a lot of sexually immoral behaviors. They basically felt, those rules that Moses laid down in the Ten Commandments and so forth were very restrictive. There was a lot more sexual freedom back in Egypt, and sex was a form of controlling my feelings. I want to feel euphoria when I want, the way I want. And God would not be punishing them for sex within marriage, but sex outside of marriage, that didn't make him very happy, and that was a no-no. And then behavior like that put him to the test, and they end up getting punished. One of the punishments was a plague of snakes. Now, back when I was in college, I remember the island of Guam. It was in the news because somebody introduced brown snakes to the island, and the snakes took over. They were everywhere. They crawled up into the trees and ate like all the birds. And they just took over because there were no predators on Guam. And I remember pictures of snakes going into people's baby carriages. There were so many. There were just snakes everywhere. And I think they solved the problem by bringing in a natural predator. I don't remember exactly, but I mean, it was just, thinking about, man, what would you rather have, mice or snakes in your house? And I would rather have mice any day than snakes, because snakes, I'm not a fan. Now, can you imagine a poisonous snakes epidemic? Not only are they eek to look at, but they bite you. Okay, man, I mean, how could you sleep? You're in a tent. It's not like you're in a house and can close the door and close all the windows and say, okay, I'm cool in my house. You're in a tent. So, that right there, it's not like they had zippers on those tents. Think about it. You're back in the days when you closed your flaps with strings. There were no zippers. There was no way to seal your tent.
Because they sinned, because they went back to their old ways and disobeyed God, he sent these poisonous snakes, and when they were being bitten by the poisonous snake, they were dying. Thousands of people, thousands of Israelites died from poisonous snake bites. So they sinned, and God sentenced them to death by snake bite. And so when they repented, when they turned around, he gave them a means to not die. So they still got bit. The snakes didn't go away right away. People were still being bit, but if what he said was, okay, Moses, I want you to make this bronze snake and put it on a pole, and anybody that looks at this bronze snake and trusts me, if you trust me and you look at the snake, you won't die. And that's what happened. Anybody that looked at the bronze snake, just by putting faith that God would be true to his word, and they looked at the bronze snake, even though they had snake bites, people stopped dying. Okay? So they were not spared the bite, but they were spared the penalty of their sin, which was death. And Jesus is saying that that's how his death on the cross works. That when we we sinned, and therefore the sentence is death. It's separation from God eternally. You go to hell. Okay? And what he's saying is, if you trust me and look at me, up on that cross dying for your sins, then it works the same way. Yes, the bite of sin was there. However, you're not going to die from it. There might be consequences on earth. You will not die from it. God will not disown you because of your sin. He will never disown you. And it will be as if you didn't sin because of me. All right? So that's important. Now, the thing is, you can go overboard with that. and say that, oh, I can do anything, Yahoo, I can go back to the brothel, I can go back to lying and cheating and stealing and doing all the things that I used to do, and God has to give me a pass. No, not necessarily. If that's what we intend to do with our salvation, then we could be in some trouble. Let's read further, because Paul kind of goes into that here. These are all warning markers, danger in our history books written down so that we don't repeat their mistakes. Our positions in the story are parallel. They at the beginning, we at the end. And we are just as capable of messing it up as they were. So don't be naive and self-confident. You're not exempt. You could fall flat on your face as easily as anyone else. Forget about self-confidence. It's useless. Cultivate God confidence. And what he actually said in the West with that forget about self-confidence is now that these things were happening to them from time to time by way of examples, and they were written for our admonition, to whom the ends of the ages have come, so that he who thinks he stands, let him be taking heed lest he fall. So you figured out that Jesus died for all your sins, and you can do whatever you want. Good for you. Very wise of you. Very true. However, if you get the idea that because you're so smart and you accepted Christ in your heart and you can do whatever you want, be very careful with that. Because if you're walking that path, trying to find that razor thin edge where you can do what you want and still get into heaven, if you intend to ignore God, to not pay attention to the Bible, to not understand more about what Christ wants from you, you might not make it. Is it Jesus or Genie that you accepted into your life? And that makes a difference. And if it's Jesus, then Jesus is the creator of the universe. He made us. He died for us, therefore he owns us. And the relationship we have with him is he's our Lord. He's our master. When we say, okay, God, I don't want to go to hell. Thank you for dying for my sins, but now I belong to you. And what do you want from me? I serve you. You don't serve me. And he will help us, and his goal is that we experience fulfillment. That is true. But we are not his masters. We don't command him. And sometimes he allows us to go through painful, disappointing experiences to demonstrate to us whether it was Jesus or Genie that we accepted into our hearts. If it was Genie, then he's like an idol for us, and we expect control. That's what an idol relationship is. I give you this, I made my sacrifice, now you owe me. You owe me good crops. You owe me healthy children. You owe me good health and all that business, okay? And if you disappoint me, I'll get a new God. I'll get myself a different idol, okay? That's the relationship. That's not the relationship we have with the God of the universe. He died for us. He's real. He's not an idol. We're not in control. We can request whatever we want, and oftentimes God says yes, but he doesn't always. And sometimes he says, okay, I want you to go through something that's going to be painful and disappointing, and endure, and I will pull you through this eventually. But what is your attitude going to be during this time? If you're going to rebel, if you're going to walk away from me and say fooey on this crap, well, then that suggests that what you actually accepted into your heart was Genie and not Jesus. Okay? Next verse, verse 13. No test or temptation that comes our way is beyond the course of what others have had to face. All you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. Now, that particular passage has been misconstrued many times. It's used to say, well, see there, God will never let anything happen to you that you can't handle. Anything God brings you through, you can handle it. You can do it. No, I absolutely agree with that. That is not, it says right there that it's talking about temptation. So this is not a mystery. It says right there it's talking about temptation. Okay? It's not talking about circumstances. Does God let you go through things you can't handle? Of course he does. All the time. I've been through many circumstances that I couldn't handle on my own. I have Christian friends right now who are going through things that are over their heads. Now, what he promises is he'll always be with us, and anything we go through, he'll be there with us, and if we lean on him, we'll be fine. If we lean on him, together we can handle anything. On our own, you're going to come up against things all the time that you can't handle on your own. And sometimes you're going through them because you've been independent, and he wants you to lean on him. And so he brings the circumstance so that you'll learn to depend on him. It's for your own good. Okay? Now, with regard to temptation, there's good news and bad news. The good news is that I can get out of, if I feel a temptation, I never have to give in to it. If I choose to obey, God will always make a way of escape. That's the bad news as well. I can't use the excuse, God, you let me experience this temptation and it was too much. I mean, there is no way. You made me a mortal, and no mortal could handle the temptation that you made me face. It's your fault, God, for making me this way. No, what he says is that you could have handled it. Now, what I wish it would have said was that all I have to do is call on the name of the Lord. And as soon as I do that, all temptation would evaporate like cotton candy in a rainstorm. No, doesn't say that. So there's still struggle involved. So yes, there is a way of escape. He didn't say it was an easy way of escape. What I wish would happen is that when we say, okay, God, I'm facing temptation, may it go away, it would like, gone! End of temptation right there. Eliminated. Nope. Very often when you face temptation, you have to struggle. You have to exercise some moral muscle. Okay, God helps you to a degree, but then he says, okay, I want you to put some muscle into this as well and struggle a little bit to overcome it. And because he doesn't make it easy, that's where we believers often give in to the temptation, because we just don't want the struggle. So we give in. And I'm guilty of that. We're all guilty of it. Okay? And that's how we grow. I mean, eventually, if we're growing, we get better and better at it so that our moral muscle gets to be tested. But he helps us, but he also expects us to flex some moral muscle to overcome the temptation as well, because there's always a way of escape. All right, I believe this is a Peterson translation of that same verse. No test or temptation that comes your way is beyond the course of what others have had to face. All you need to remember is that God will never let you down. He'll never let you be pushed past your limit. He'll always be there to help you come through it. Now, the next passage here, it says, so, my dear friends, when you see people reducing God to something they can use or control, get out of their company as fast as you can. And because he's using this control language, that tells you that what Paul actually said was something about idolatry, because ultimately that's what idolatry is that deal. And it's a means of me using the gods or using God for personal control. I'm not interested in getting to know God or obeying God. I'm interested in getting something for me. I give you my crap, you give me good stuff. Okay? That's the deal. And it says in the East, wherefore, my beloved ones, be fleeing from idolatry. Okay? Now, I'm going to stop right here, but I do want to go back to just one thing. This is an issue that sometimes gets raised with these verses that we talked about with the children of Israel there. And, like if you take a Bibleist lit class, they focus on this a lot. How mean God was! How could he do that? He saves them from the Pharaoh in Egypt, and they get out in the desert, and he parts the Red Sea for them, and he appears as a pillar of fire, gives them manna from heaven and all this. And then he beats the crap out of them. Only 2 of them get to enter the promised land because of their disobedience and lack of faith. Only 2 of the original group. Their children make it, but only 2 from the original group, Caleb and Joshua. And the rest of them, man, bad thing. And think about all those guys that got bitten by the snakes. What a terrible, terrible curse. Being bitten by poisonous snakes. Can you imagine the terror that you would face? How could you sleep at night without zippers on your tent, knowing the snakes can come in and bite you, and your kids might wake up dead, or you might wake up dead. Who knows? How terrible. And so you think, why would God be so cruel with that stuff? And some of those people got eaten. I mean, the earth would open up and swallow them. Like thousands died like that. It was an earthquake happened, and all the bad people got sucked into the earth, and the earth closed in on them. All right, now, Think about it. There are two kinds of revelation whereby God reveals himself. You have natural revelation, which is what we have when we observe nature. When we study science, we appreciate the complexity of nature, and that tells you that there is a God, there is an intelligence behind this universe. And then you have special revelation, is where you see miracles, things that defy nature, that tells you that something supernatural is at work. And what the children of Israel experienced was divine. It was special revelation. They saw the predicted curses on Pharaoh. So they saw the plagues. They saw the Red Sea part. They saw the pillar of fire traveling with them in the desert. They saw food come out of the sky and feed them for like years. Okay, so they experience supernatural stuff on a daily basis. Now, who else has done that? I would nobody in the people that are, all the 5 people that are going to watch this video, none of you have seen supernatural stuff like that. I certainly haven't. I've seen supernatural stuff, but not on that level. The more you see, the more light you have, the more you're responsible for it. I mean, that's right there in the Gospels. Jesus made that very point, that the more you see, the more you're responsible for it. Okay? And so they saw a lot. Therefore, they had every reason to have faith, and they still chose against it. And therefore, they were punished more harshly. Okay? Now, natural revelation is a beautiful thing as well. And so I think that we do have some culpability in the time that we have. I know that there is, in the scientific community, there is a very strong belief in atheism from many, and the atheistic evolution, I should say, the idea that life started from organic matter, several billion years ago, and over time and random chance, life evolved to what it is now. I have great difficulty with that. Now, I'm a psychiatrist. My specialized area is neuroscience. And based on what I know about the human brain, I would find it very, very difficult to have faith that it evolved from a booger several billion years ago, just because of time and random chance. I don't believe it. The current brains that humans have is incredibly powerful. It has the computing power of 10 exaflops. An exaflop is basically, what that means is that the human brain at the neural level has the ability to do 10, not 10,000 calculations per second, not 10 million calculations per second, but 10 quintillion calculations per second. What's a quintillion? Well, if you take 10 to the third, that's 1,000. 10 to the 6th is a million, all right? Well, this is 10 to the 18th. So that is not a million, higher than a million, higher than a billion, higher than a trillion, higher than a quadrillion. It's 10 quintillion. So 1 with 18 zeros. That's how many calculations per second that the human brain is capable of. Now, do you believe that, only now within the last few years have we developed computers with that kind of power. Right now, there are 7 computers on planet Earth that have the ability to do that. And guess what? None of them are the size of a human brain. They're all huge. Okay? But this is the type of computer you need to do things like full self-driving. Okay? But we're only now getting computers that can approach that computing power. And yet, whenever a person drives down the street, they are doing calculations in their head on that level so that they can stay within their lane and adjust their speed and so forth. They're doing these calculations all the time. They were born with it. Now, do you really believe that a computer with that much power, and these computers cost millions of dollars, and yet every normal human has a computer with this kind of power, and that power, 10 quintillion calculations per second, developed from a booger several billion years ago based on random chance? I have a very hard time believing that. That's natural. That's evidence. That's supernatural evidence. That's evidence that there was an intellect that engineered life. And specifically, humanity is an amazing thing. The human brain is clearly the most amazing organ of all. Okay? And it screams that it was created by something outside of us. And then you add to that near-death experiences, the fact that people, when they die and the brain shuts down, they are able to describe things that are like miles away from their dead body, and they were accurately able to observe phenomena far away from their organic bodies, which suggests that we not only have a brain, but there is this supernatural self, that the physics, that natural physics, it defies the laws of natural physics, and yet there it is. Many cases of these sorts of things. So, I mean, you look at these evidences, and you have to go away going, you know, obviously there is a God. There's no other explanation that makes sense. Okay? But we're responsible for that knowledge. If you have evidence that God exists, that He is real, that He is with you, the stronger that evidence is, the stronger the punishment for ignoring it. Okay, and that's what the children of Israel experienced. So, just wanted to address that, because sometimes when you go over these Old Testament passages, people get all, I was God so angry. That doesn't seem like the God of Jesus. And, there are rules, and you know God follows these rules, so it's important to be aware of those. Okay, so we'll pick up here next time, and we'll complete 1 Corinthians chapter 10 on our next visit. See you then. Thanks for watching.